Out of gaming, maybe out of the casino business for good. Today, Steve Wynn agreed to settle a complaint by the Gaming Control Board.
Wynn resigning as chairman and CEO of Wynn Resorts. Cheryl Casoni has more details. Cheryl.
Big news, Dagan. Wynn Resorts says that Steve Wynn's resignation is effective immediately.
At his peak, Steve Wynn was untouchable. He owned the Mirage, the Bellagio, and Wynn Las Vegas. Properties so iconic they redefined what a casino could be. Forbes called him the king of Las Vegas, and investors treated his word like gold. But his life right now? It's completely ruined. What Steve built wasn't like anything Vegas had seen before. His resorts weren't just buildings, they were experiences, theaters, fountains, art collections worth hundreds of millions. All designed to make people feel like they were stepping into something beyond gambling. Guests described his properties as legendary. Industry insiders saw him as the guy who turned Vegas from dusty mob-run casinos into a world-class destination. But that empire wasn't built overnight, and the cracks were already forming long before anyone noticed. When his father died in 1963, Steve was just 21 years old. Most people that age would have sold the business and moved on. Steve saw something different. He saw opportunity. He took over the bingo operations and started learning everything he could about the gambling business. He studied the numbers, watched the competition, figured out what made people keep coming back. By 1967, he had saved enough money to make his first real move. He bought a small stake in the Frontier Hotel in Las Vegas. It wasn't much, but it got his foot in the door. The real turning point came in 1973 when Steve renovated the Golden Nugget Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Nobody expected much. Downtown was old, tired, full of places that smelled like cigarettes and desperation. But Steve had a different vision. He ripped out the dingy carpets and installed marble floors. He brought in crystal chandeliers. He hired the best dealers and trained them to treat every customer like royalty. Within months, the Golden Nugget was making more money than anyone thought possible. High rollers who used to fly past downtown started making stops. Steve Wynn had proven he could turn a dump into a destination. But that was nothing compared to what came next. In 1989, Steve opened the Mirage on the Las Vegas Strip. It cost $630 million to build, the most expensive casino in history at that time. People thought he was insane. Nobody spends that kind of money on a casino. Steve didn't just build a casino, though. He built a tropical paradise in the middle of the desert. He installed a massive aquarium behind the check-in desk with real sharks swimming inside. He created an artificial volcano outside that erupted every 15 minutes, shooting fire 50 feet into the air. Thousands of people would stop on the sidewalk just to watch it explode. The Mirage changed everything. In its first year, it generated over $1 million per day. Other casino owners scrambled to copy the formula, but Steve was already 3 steps ahead. In 1998, he opened the Bellagio, spending $1.6 billion on what would become the most iconic hotel in Las Vegas. The fountains out front danced to music shooting water 460 feet into the air. Inside, he hung a $300 million art collection on the walls. Guests could gamble surrounded by Picasso and Van Gogh paintings. Steve Wynn had turned casinos into palaces. By the 2000s, Steve was worth $3.5 billion. His company, Wynn Resorts, was valued at over $25 billion. He had casinos in Las Vegas, Macau, and Boston. Casino Journal named him Casino Executive of the Century. Presidents attended his grand openings. He owned one of the most expensive private art collections in America. Everything he touched turned to gold. At least that's what everyone thought. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. Something that would eventually destroy everything. The first real crack in Steve Wynn's perfect image appeared in 2010. And it had nothing to do with casinos. After 46 years of marriage, Steve and his wife Elaine filed for divorce. The settlement was massive. $741 million. One of the largest divorce payouts in American history. For most people, that would have been the end of the story, but Steve and Elaine were not most people. Just 1 year later, in 2011, they remarried. Industry insiders whispered that it was about business, not love. Elaine wasn't just Steve's wife. She was the co-founder of Wynn Resorts, the woman who had been there from the beginning, helping build the empire brick by brick. The second marriage didn't last any longer than people expected. Behind closed doors, things were falling apart. Employees who worked at Wynn Resorts noticed tension. Elaine would walk into meetings and Steve would barely acknowledge her. Other times, he would cut her off mid-sentence in front of the board. People talked quietly in break rooms and hotel hallways. Something was off. But nobody dared say anything out loud. Steve Wynn was the most powerful man in Las Vegas. You didn't question him, you didn't cross him, and you definitely didn't spread rumors about him. When Elaine and Steve divorced for the second time in 2018, the battle was uglier. Elaine wanted to keep her seat on the board of directors at Wynn Resorts. Steve wanted her gone completely. He argued that she was vindictive, that she was trying to sabotage the company out of spite. Elaine's lawyers fired back with hints about inappropriate conduct. They never spelled it out directly, but the implication was clear. They knew something. Court documents filed in 2016 during the custody battle over company control included references to behavior issues and a pattern of misconduct. Steve denied everything. He called the accusations lies designed to hurt him in the business world. What most people didn't know at the time was that Elaine had been protecting Steve for years. She had seen things, heard complaints, watched settlements get paid out to employees who signed non-disclosure agreements. As co-founder, she had access to everything: financial records, legal files, internal complaints that never made it to the public. And now that she was on the outside, she had no reason to keep protecting him anymore. The lawyers hinted, the court filings suggested, but the full truth stayed buried just a little longer. In Las Vegas, rumors started spreading faster. Casino workers talked to each other. Dealers mentioned strange stories about closed-door meetings. Housekeeping staff whispered about incidents in hotel suites. Managers who had worked at Wynn properties for decades suddenly quit without explanation. When reporters asked questions, they hit walls. Nobody would go on the record. Nobody wanted their name attached to any accusations against Steve Wynn. He still owned the biggest casinos in town. He still had connections to politicians and police. Speaking out meant losing your job, your reputation, maybe more. But Elaine knew the truth, and soon the whole world would know it too. On January 26, 2018, the Wall Street Journal published an investigation that would destroy Steve Wynn's empire in a single morning. The article wasn't a rumor. It wasn't gossip whispered in the casino hallways. It was a detailed, documented report based on interviews with dozens of people who had worked for Steve over the past 30 years. The reporters had tracked down manicurists, cocktail waitresses, massage therapists, executives, and managers. They had obtained court documents, settlement agreements, and internal company emails. What they uncovered was a pattern of behavior that stretched back decades. According to the investigation, Steve had pressured employees into situations they never asked for and never wanted. The incidents happened in massage rooms, hotel suites, offices, and backstage areas at his casinos. Some women reported being cornered. Others described being called to private meetings that turned into something else entirely. One manicurist who worked at one of his salons had been paid a $7.5 million settlement back in 2005 after she reported what happened to her. The company paid her to stay silent and sign a non-disclosure agreement. Nobody outside a small circle of executives and lawyers ever knew about it, until now. The article landed like a bomb. Within an hour, it was the top story on every major news website. Cable news channels broke into regular programming to discuss it. Steve Wynn's name trended on social media with thousands of people sharing the story and commenting in disbelief. How did he get away with this for so long? People asked. Everyone in Vegas knew, but nobody talked, others wrote. The most powerful man on the Strip was a predator, one comment read. The reaction was instant and brutal. Steve immediately issued a statement denying everything. He called the allegations preposterous and said it was all part of a smear campaign organized by his ex-wife Elaine to damage him during their divorce proceedings. He claimed the Wall Street Journal had been manipulated, that the timing of the article, just weeks after his second divorce, proved it was coordinated. But the problem was the evidence. The reporters had documents. They had settlement agreements with Steve's signature on them. They had testimony from people who didn't know each other but described similar experiences. One denial wasn't going to make this go away. The stock market responded immediately. Wynn Resorts shares dropped 10% in a single day, wiping out $3.5 billion in market value. Steve's personal fortune took a hit of over $400 million overnight. Investors panicked. If Steve lost his gaming licenses in Nevada or Massachusetts, the entire company could collapse. The Nevada Gaming Control Board announced it was opening an investigation. The Massachusetts Gaming Commission, which had just approved a Wynn casino in Boston, said it would review whether the company was still fit to hold a license. Then more women came forward. The Wall Street Journal article had opened the floodgates. Women who had stayed silent for years because they were afraid or had signed agreements suddenly found courage in numbers. Within days, the count went from a dozen to dozens. Each news story added another layer of detail, another incident, another settlement, another cover-up. The Wall Street Journal article was just the beginning. Within 48 hours, more women contacted reporters with their own stories. Some had worked at the Mirage in the 1990s, others had been employed at the Bellagio or Wynn Las Vegas in the 2000s. A few had worked at the Macau properties. The pattern was identical across decades and continents. Managers had been told to keep quiet. Anyone who complained was either fired immediately or paid off with settlements that came with strict non-disclosure agreements. The entire company had been designed to protect Steve, and everyone who worked there knew it. State gaming regulators moved fast. The Nevada Gaming Control Board, which has the power to revoke casino licenses, launched a formal investigation into whether Steve was still suitable to hold a gaming license in the state. This was serious. In Nevada, casino owners must maintain a reputation for honesty and integrity. If the board found evidence of a pattern of misconduct, they could strip Steve of his ability to operate casinos in Las Vegas. The Massachusetts Gaming Commission opened its own investigation. The Wynn Boston Harbor Casino was still under construction, scheduled to open later that year. If Massachusetts pulled the license, the company would lose billions. The board of directors at Wynn Resorts held emergency meetings. They had a crisis on their hands. The stock was tanking. Regulators were circling. Investors were demanding answers. And Steve, their founder and chairman, was at the center of it all. On February 6, 2018, less than 2 weeks after the Wall Street Journal article, the board made its decision. Steve Wynn would resign as CEO and chairman of Wynn Resorts, effective immediately. The company issued a statement saying Steve had decided to step down to avoid becoming a distraction. But everyone knew the truth. He had been forced out. The man who had built a $25 billion empire with his own name on every building no longer had any role in the company. Within days, the fallout spread beyond the casinos. Steve was forced to resign as finance chairman of the Republican National Committee, a position that gave him direct access to political power. MIT, where Steve had donated millions of dollars, removed his name from a scholarship program. The University of Pennsylvania, his alma mater, quietly distanced itself from one of its most famous graduates. Every institution that had once been proud to be associated with Steve Wynn was now scrubbing his name from their websites and promotional materials. But the legal consequences were just beginning. The Nevada Gaming Commission launched a full investigation into how Wynn Resorts had handled complaints over the years. They discovered a system designed to hide problems, not fix them. Employees who reported incidents were shuffled to different departments or paid off. Human resources files were incomplete or missing entirely. Settlement agreements were handled by outside law firms to keep them off company records. In 2019, the commission issued its findings and hit Wynn Resorts with a $35 million fine, one of the largest penalties in Nevada gaming history. Massachusetts followed with its own $35 million fine. Steve was forced to sell every share of stock he owned in Wynn Resorts. In March 2018, he sold a 12% stake for $2.1 billion. By May, he had sold everything. The company that bore his name no longer had any connection to him at all. Steve Wynn still has money. His net worth is around $3.1 billion, which means he's still one of the richest people in America. But money can't buy back what he lost. He lives in private, now, mostly out of the public eye, hidden away from the world he used to dominate. The man who once had presidents attending his casino openings now struggles to get a reservation at restaurants he used to own. Former business partners cross the street when they see him coming. People who used to return his calls within minutes now let them go to voicemail forever. He tried to rebuild his image. He hired crisis management firms and public relations experts. He gave a few carefully planned interviews where he continued to deny all the allegations. He claimed he was a victim of lies spread by his ex-wife and the media. He positioned himself as someone caught up in the excesses of the Me Too movement. An innocent man destroyed by false accusations. But nobody believed him. The settlements were real. The documents had his signature. The pattern was too clear, too consistent across too many years and too many people. One interview with a friendly outlet wasn't going to change that. In Las Vegas, Steve Wynn became a ghost. He still owns property in the city, but he rarely visits. When he does, he keeps a low profile. Casino workers who used to greet him with respect now avoid eye contact. High rollers who once begged for invitations to his private parties want nothing to do with him. A former business partner was quoted saying that Steve still thinks he can spin his way out of this, that he doesn't understand it's over. But it is over. Completely and permanently over. The buildings still carry his name. Wynn Las Vegas, Wynn Macau, Wynn Boston Harbor. The company can't afford to rebrand every property. Removing his name from thousands of signs, millions of chips, and countless promotional materials would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, so the name stays. But it means something different now. What was once a symbol of luxury and success is now a reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked for too long. Tourists take photos in front of the Wynn. Fountains with no idea who the man behind the name really was or what he did. Steve sold off parts of his legendary art collection, pieces he had spent decades acquiring. Some of the paintings that used to hang in the Bellagio are now in private collections around the world, sold quietly through auction houses that keep buyer and seller names confidential. His political connections vanished overnight. Nobody in Washington returns his calls anymore. The donations he used to make to campaigns and causes are no longer welcome. The legacy Steve spent his entire life building is gone. Casino historians will always credit him with transforming Las Vegas from a gambling town into an entertainment destination. The Mirage volcano and the Bellagio fountains changed the industry forever. But his name will always be attached to something else now. Something darker that no amount of money or public relations can erase. He wanted his name in lights across the Las Vegas Strip. He got his wish. But now that name represents everything wrong with unchecked power and the people who thought they were too important to face consequences.